Hello there. Well, I've come out into the garden because I wanted to share with you the fact that this week, amidst all of the uncertainty and the bewilderment and the pain and the sorrow, I found it's been really important to also be deliberate about focusing on some of the blessings that still exist. And for me, seeing spring flowers determinedly opening up from buds, regardless of coronavirus, has somehow reminded me of the bigger picture and reminded me of who God is through space and time, even when our very particular experience at this particular point in time is so affected by this disease that we can't see, but we feel its effects so profoundly. Anita yesterday was talking about the way in which altruistic behaviour seems to have grown, and certainly here on our street with a WhatsApp group and contacting some local elderly people via landline from time to time, it's been moving really to realise, gosh, it was this that took us to a point where we really got to know our neighbours. And that, I think, is sobering, but it's also a sign that God is able to bring blessing out of even these bizarre circumstances, and circumstances that we would never have asked to be led into. This morning, I'd like us to think about Romans chapter 8. It's that great chapter about life in the Spirit. And I think at this time I've been leaning a lot on Jesus's words shortly before he's condemned to death, when he says to Pontius Pilate that his kingdom is not of this world. And I think it's really important that we remember at this time that our hope is not invested in bricks and mortar or physical health or anything like that, but is invested in a kingdom that is not of this world, but which we see glimpses and more than glimpses of in the here and now. And of course, so much of that is as a result of life in and with God and in the presence of God, and knowing the work of the Holy Spirit in us and amongst us. And so in Romans chapter 8, there are just a few verses that I thought I would remind us of at this time, beginning with Romans chapter 8, verse 6. To set the mind on the flesh is death, but to set the mind on the Spirit is life and peace. There is death around, and it looks as though there will be much more of it. But to focus on death is to be distracted from the hope that we have in Jesus Christ, but also in the presence and the work of the Holy Spirit, which, as St. Paul says, brings peace. And then in verse 11, if the Spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will give life to your mortal bodies also through his Spirit that dwells in you. Of course, this doesn't remove us from death and even untimely or tragic death, but it does remind us of this amazing promise of the life and the work of the Spirit with us, which means that we can face both life and death in a totally different frame of mind, knowing that we are already part of this kingdom which is yet to be fulfilled. And then later in the passage, verse 18, I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory about to be revealed to us. For me, the spring flowers are just a kind of mere hint, an example of the creative goodness and beauty of God. Verse 23, not only the creation, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, groan inwardly. This is a time for growing and groaning. And yet, likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. For we do not know how to pray as we ought, but that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. There will be times of bewilderment. Perhaps that's what you're going through now, times of pain and suffering. And I guess my encouragement is a very simple one, to allow the presence of God, the Holy Spirit, to be alive and at work in you and through you, in you to build you up, but also inspiring you in acts of love and service to others, because that is what will sustain us and give us life at this really strange time. God bless you.